I think if there's one publisher out there that I have the biggest love-hate relationship with, it undoubtedly has to be Rockstar Games. They have produced some of my favorite games of all time, the GTA series, the Red Dead Redemption series, Bully, Manhunt, Max Payne. These are some of the best games I've ever played. But on the flip side, Rockstar is no stranger to controversy. We already know that they are notorious for protecting their IP, taking modders to court, and impacting their livelihoods. And now just recently, in an unexpected twist, one of the most popular game publishers in the world, the very same publisher responsible for GTA and Red Dead Redemption, were caught red-handed once again selling their own games with cracked executables. Now the reason for this is simple. These cracked executables remove anti-piracy DRM checks from the game. All this came to a head because last week a GTA content creator, Vadim M, discussed in a lot of detail the anti-piracy measures used in both Manhunt and Max Payne 2. Rockstar would simply steal these cracks that were done by scene groups such as Razor 1911 and Myth and incorporate them into the Steam version of the game. I also recommend checking out his video that goes into detail outlining how the anti-piracy measures work in this game. It's truly fascinating stuff. Now, if you open up the test app executables that are supplied with Max Payne 2, you can easily see the Myth logo in there. Now, Myth was a pretty popular scene group back in the day. And if you also open up the testapp.exe for Manhunt, you can see the words RZR or Razor, which signifies the group Razor 1911, clearly embedded into the executable. Now, Razor 1911 is considered the oldest cracking or wares group around, forming in 1985 in the days of the Commodore 64. They started out as a simple demo group and then moved on to cracking games. Now, many people probably remember Razor 1911 predominantly from the PC CD-ROM era, where they would work on no CD cracks for many popular games. And for those people that aren't familiar with what a no CD crack is, back in the days of PC gaming, you would install a game from CD-ROM onto your hard drive, but you would always have to have the CD-ROM installed into the CD-ROM drive at all times in order to play the game, because the game itself would do subsequent verification and checks that the CD-ROM was, number one, a legitimate CD, and number two, inserted into the drive. And this can get quite annoying, especially when you own a game and you just want to install it on your hard drive and play it yourself. So the scene groups themselves would begin to crack these games and offer what was known as no CD cracks. Now, they would also bundle the entire game as a release, but they would also separately provide a no CD crack executable and upload that to various FTP sites. But let's go back to Manhunt and Max Payne 2 for a second. On Steam, these games have been around forever, since around 2010, I believe. And I will say that these discoveries of finding cracked executables inside the distribution is not new information. These discoveries were made all the way back in 2010, when another user discovered that a myth crack of Max Payne 2 was used in the Steam distribution. However, if you think that this is an isolated incident, you would be mistaken. Now, Vadim M's video led modder and reverse engineer Silent to wonder if Rockstar had also performed the same method to remove anti-piracy measures from other games, such as Midnight Club 2, which is no longer sold on Steam. Now, after taking a look at Midnight Club 2's executable, he found the testapp.exe also had the string Razor 1911 in its executable. Now, to be very clear, these piracy and scene groups weren't there for software preservation. At the time, the word software preservation didn't really register with anyone. The whole goal of a piracy or a scene group at the time was to get a game, get a release before the competition, crack it, and spread it worldwide before anyone else, effectively being number one and being the group that was able to get this release before anyone else. And the best groups, and Razor 1911 was certainly one of those, were able to get releases ahead of release date in many, many cases. They had people that worked at game stores and would basically supply these games earlier. So their whole goal was not to preserve games, even though that is definitely something that in 2023, we take a look at these scene groups and we kind of embrace with open arms and say, these scene groups had a vision that no one else did. The reality is, by cracking games and offering no CD cracks, offered the freedom for the end user to play the game in any way they wanted to. And it just proves that these no CD cracks do indeed preserve video games. Without them, many older games would simply not run on modern day hardware. Now, this story is quite surprising to many people, but to be honest, it's not a big surprise to me. The story of publishers resorting to using cracks to remove their own DRM isn't new. However, generally speaking, this work is usually handled internally. In fact, we've seen this happen with other publishers. Ubisoft has also been in situations where older PC-based DRMs such as SecuROM, a DRM that encrypted individual mastering CDs with a unique hidden key, simply won't allow their games to run on Windows. So they must come up with a solution to provide a DRM-free executable. This usually means either locating one that they had internally, or in some cases, rebuilding the executable with the DRM removed, effectively cracking the game themselves. But this is something that many publishers have difficulty with because there is a cost and a resource allocation that is involved with effectively restoring old source code and being able to rebuild it without the DRM checks in place. In some cases, the source code may simply not be available anymore. It may be lost or it may just be incomplete. Now, when it comes to DRMs such as SecuROM and SafeDisk, these particular DRMs are no longer supported in Windows. Ever since Windows 10, Microsoft has quite rightly removed the ability to use these forms of DRM in their operating system. And this means that the games that you owned back in the day that did come with SafeDisk or SecuROM DRM will no longer work on a modern Windows platform. So this means that a digital publisher store such as Steam has an issue when it comes to kind of reissuing these old games that, number one, were never meant for a digital distribution service in the first place, and more importantly, number two, comes with DRM that is no longer supported by the operating system. Ubisoft has also been caught red-handed using cracked executables as well. Infamously, back in the day, they were caught red-handed using a reloaded crack for Rainbow Six Vegas 2 on the PC. And publishers are in a difficult spot when they want to reissue their old PC titles on digital storefronts, originally from CD Media. Many of these titles, as mentioned, are riddled with DRM. So, to make this happen, they either have to spend the time and money to build a new executable and have QA test it in a in-house environment. Or, as is the case of Rockstar, they just resort to a no-CD crack from GameCopyWorld.com. Now, this is very, very embarrassing to Rockstar. But I will also add that I don't believe Rockstar will ever respond to the concerns and criticisms from the community about this. As we've seen, Max Payne 2 and Manhunt both still have the same Myth and Razor 1911 cracked executables on Steam, and these have been there since 2010. They can simply just ignore the criticism from the community, which is what they're probably going to do. Now, there are a lot of people out there that think Razor 1911 is no longer active or they're no longer around, but this is actually not true at all. In fact, they are still very active in the scene. Although they're not involved in, say, de novo cracks, they are continuing to crack games as they come up. In fact, I saw one recently from a game, High on Life, which only came out a year ago or so, that was also cracked by Razor 1911. So they are very much around to this day. Now, of course, they're not the same Razor 1911 as the kind of glory days of the PC CD-ROM era, but they are definitely still around. They're still active and they're still cracking games to this day. So I did want to clarify that as well. In fact, I'm also working on a long form video about the history of Razor 1911, but that's something that is kind of planning to be released at some point in the future. But I am very much interested in, obviously, in the scene, and I do love to cover stories like this as well. But what do you guys think about this whole story about Rockstar basically selling their own cracks? Look, this is something, as mentioned, for me, is not a huge surprise to see this. It's definitely embarrassing, but Rockstar is a giant behemoth. They don't have to respond to any concerns and criticism. They just kind of move when they need to move. They'll just kind of announce Grand Theft Auto 6, in a couple of months from now, and everyone's going to forget about this whole story until it happens again. And that's the thing. Every couple of years, there is a story like this that kind of reemerges where some game publisher has to resort to a no CD crack from a popular scene group. And it's just the way things are. Now, look, we can definitely signal boost this, and this is another embarrassing moment for Rockstar. But at the end of the day, I'm not really that surprised that this has happened. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Rockstar and how they are handling these older PC game releases. This is definitely not the last scenario that we'll hear about. These things will definitely keep popping up over time. But we're going to leave it here for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.